Okay, I'm going to go kind of quick here, and because I'm going to assume that you already watched the Photoshop tutorial on cartooning, but I want to show you some differences. So if you want to use Inkscape, Inkscape has a little bit of differences that you may have to research on YouTube yourself. But this is Adobe Illustrator, and so if you already have Creative Cloud or a trial version, I think you're going to like this. But it has some similarities, but what I think frustrates people is that it's not exactly like Photoshop. And so it has its own, there's a reason why there's Illustrator and Photoshop. So I'm going to show you real fast. I think it's going to actually be quicker than in Photoshop, but it works on the same principles, especially with the pen tool. So initially what I have done is I've placed this sketch that I made in ArtRage, but you could have drawn it and scanned it, whatever. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lock that layer so I don't actually draw on that layer. So that can be kind of frustrating. And what I'm going to start off with is name these, just like in Photoshop that I was talking about. I'm going to name this face so that I'm staying reasonably organized, even though Illustrator makes sublayers, and so you never really kind of compress a layer like you do in Photoshop. It's still a good idea to make layers. And so what you're going to notice down here is that there's a difference between this and Photoshop. Also, we have a fill color and also a stroke color instead of a foreground and a background color. So what I'm going to do to start off with is I'm going to double click on that. You can works pretty much the same way as Photoshop, and I'm going to pick a little flesh tone here. I'm going to again start off just like in Photoshop with a basic shape, but then instead of having to modify the selection, I'm just going to go up to the direct select or the regular selection tool, and I can modify this to about the size that I want. And I'm just going to keep it reasonably simple here. But again, here I can't see through it, so what I want to do is, since I have it selected, I go up to the opacity and I can change the opacity to maybe 40% so I can see through it. Now if I click off of it and I need to click back on, I could select it like this. Or I can also, a little bit different than in Photoshop, where Photoshop you click on the layer. This, to select this path, basically it's all paths now, is click on this little circle, and then that's what reselects it. So before I do that right now, I'm going to go back to 100%, and you can see that it looks like it's 100%, but if I click on the sublayer, that's when I need to click on this path, and that's what's at 40%. So I'll go back up to 100% for a second, because I'm going to go ahead and do these ears. And while we're there, I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to drag it below the face layer, and it actually puts it in as a sublayer. I can Control Z, and I could drag this up and put it above, and that way now this layer is independent. So this is the ear, and I'm going to put both ears on the same sub layer here, I think. But now I can just take another ellipse and drag it out, and while I have that color, I can reuse it, and I could drag that out here and make another little ear. Okay, so now I've got the ears, and sorry about the telephone call. But let's say that I wanted that to be a slightly, let's say I had a different color at the moment, and I made it the wrong color to begin with. Photoshop has an interesting kind of, or I mean Illustrator has an interesting kind of eyedropper tool. So what you need to do is you need to select the object that you want to change, and if you choose the eyedropper tool, instead of just picking the color, which it does, it also picks the attributes of that object and then transfers it to the object that you have selected. So if I want this color to be superimposed onto this object, or transferred to that object, then all I have to do is click on it, and it will take every attribute. So if there's a drop shadow, it'll take that. If there's a stroke at a different thickness, it'll take that. So that's kind of a neat way of doing things here. I'm going to, while we're right here, I think I'm going to put this and make this neck. I got to spell it right. So now we have the neck. Oops, and I clicked on gray apparently, so I need to click on that. And now to get rid of that selection in Photoshop, you hit Control D for deselect. Here you're going to hit Shift Control A, which is kind of odd, but we're going to go now to the neck layer, and I'm going to use the pen tool just like we did in Photoshop. So I'm going to left click and drag to get a curve, and then left click and drag. So I'm really expecting you to have already seen the Photoshop tutorial. Then I want a corner right here, so I'm going to left click, but while I'm holding Alt down, I'm going to left click and drag, and then I'm going to come around here and left click and drag, but no Alt. Then I'm going to left click and drag with the Alt key down, and then left click, and if I need to make a curve I could, or I'm just going to leave it like that. Then I'm going to left click and drag again with the Alt key down, and I'm going to left click and just plain drag. So there's my neck. Now while I have that color up, maybe I would like it to be just a shade darker, so I can click on it while it's still selected and then just darken that shade just a little bit to give a little bit of depth. Now I can either go to the move tool and click off of it, or I can hit Control Shift A again, remember. So we're going to go to the face, select the face, and I'm going to go back down and change that opacity so I can see what's going on here. And I'm going to make a new layer, and the new layer is going to be above the face. And I'm going to hit Control Shift A again, so I'm deselecting, and I can thicken up this stroke later on. In Photoshop we did that one of the last things, but here we can do it anytime. I'm going to build up this eye, then the lips. I'm going to change my stroke or my fill color to white and leave my stroke black, because I'll make some eyes. This is going to be a really kind of a strange looking woman, but I want to show you now. I'm going to hit Control Shift A again to deselect, then go back to the lips tool, and I'm going to change my fill color to maybe green eyes, and I don't want any stroke, so I'm going to click on the stroke right here. It's going to interchange itself. It's going to come forward, and then I'm going to hit the no stroke. So all I'm going to get is a round fill. Then Control Shift A, and then I'm going to do the iris. So I can always reset back to black and white by clicking on this little small icon, but I don't want to stroke on this one either, and I do want it to be black and white, so I can click on this little arrow and it will flip-flop colors, and then since this is the foremost color I can hit no, and that changes that. So what I'm going to get is a black fill, and I can hold Shift down if I want a perfect circle. I'm not sure if I do want that or not, but if I need to move it now, I'm going to click on the black arrow and I can move it, or I can use it with the arrow keys on my keyboard. And then, like we did in the Photoshop, I'm going to make a white little highlight, still using that ellipse tool. Maybe I'll make this perfectly circular. And then I'm going to use the move tool, and I'll just use the arrow keys to bounce it around. So now that's on an eye layer. I'll change that name. And I can do just what I did with Photoshop, is I can drag it into a new layer, but I want to make sure that I have the entire layer, so I need to click on this little circle to the right, and then I can drag it down and makes an eye copy. I can then grab it and drag it over here to make the second eye. Then what I need to do is make the nose, and for right now then I can go back to my face and I can bump it back up to, well, no, I can't either, because I need to see the mouth and the nose. So I'm going to hit Control Shift A, deselect that. I'm going to come up and make a new layer. This is going to be the mouth. I'll make it simply like I did in the Photoshop file. I'm going to take the pen tool, and I'm going to have no fill, but a black stroke. So I can click and drag, and I'm going to take the direct select tool and drag this out. And you can see that the lines are yellow. and which is probably very difficult for you to see. So I can change that by double clicking on the layer, and then I can change it to some other color that I can definitely see. So I'll make it change to brown so I can see these lines. I go back to the direct select, click on it, and now I can change my anchor points and my curves. Okay, so I just noticed that I made a mouth layer, but I drew the nose, so I'll change that. Been a hard week. And I'll make another layer, and I'll make this one the mouth. And I'm going to use the pen tool again. Left click and drag, left click and drag, and there's my mouth, but I don't want it to be in that spot, so I can use the direct select, grab this anchor, and grab this anchor, and I can pull it around, change the curve a little bit by grabbing hold of the handles, and just rearrange it a little bit. And now that I have all that, I can hit Control-Shift-A again, and I'm going to go back to my face, select it by this circle here, and I'm going to run that back up to 100%. So I've got kind of an ugly looking woman here, sorry. But then what I'm going to do is make a new layer, but I'm going to draw it below the neck and the head and the face so that I can do this hair. And I'm going to do this really quickly. I could do it a couple of different ways though here. I could do it with the brush or the pen or the pencil. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the pencil for a second here. And it's kind of nice, especially if you have a drawing pad. It's a little messier with a mouse, but this already automatically has a smoothing feature to it. So I can kind of come around here and just get the general proximity of everything. I really don't care if it's exactly. Because it is a path. Now I can, I said selected, I can make this color, I lost my blonde color here. So I can fill that in nicely, and that goes really quickly. Now I could use the pen tool again, like we had been doing, but this is kind of quick. So now I'm going to make another layer, put it above the face, and then I'm going to have, this is the bangs. And then I'm going to go ahead and do that same thing, kind of peppermint patty-esque there, and I take the eyedropper and select it, and there we've got it. Now I could do the hair or the shirt, but I'm at 14 minutes and I don't know that I can get that done. Okay, real quickly then, what I need to do is I need to get rid of my background, my initial place object, so I can delete that. And then I could select everything with one foul swoop by drawing a box around it using the black selection tool. I can move it around, I could scale it. But the nice thing is we've got all the layers. I would finish off the shirt, but I'm running out of time. But the one thing about Illustrator is you need to go, instead of File Save As, you're going to have to go to File Export, and that is where you're going to save it as a PNG. So that's what I want you to turn it in as a PNG. So have fun.